Hello, I'm glad you joined us today as we continue to study the Gospel of Mark. Today we pick up in Mark chapter 12 and verse 11. It says, He began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a wall around it and dug a vat under the winepress and built a tower and rented it out to vine growers and went away on a journey. And at the harvest time he sent a slave to the vine growers in order to receive some of the produce of the vineyard from the vine growers. And they took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. And again he sent another slave, and they wounded him in the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and they killed him, and so many others, beating some and killing others. He had one more to send, a beloved son. He sent him last of all, saying, They will respect my son. But those vine growers said to one another, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And they took him, and they killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the vine growers and will give the vineyard to others. Have you not read the scriptures? The stone which the builders rejected, this became the chief cornerstone. This came out from the Lord and is marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to seize him, and yet they feared the multitude, for they understood that he spoke the parable against them. And so they left him and they went away. These rulers are full of envy and hate toward Jesus. They've attempted to entrap Jesus and discredit him by their question of authority. Remember, he was in the temple in our last study, and they asked, by what authority you do these things? And by his counter question, putting the dilemma on them, they were not willing to answer. He silenced them and exposed their treachery and their hypocrisy. And now by a simple parable, he answers fully their question, showing his divine authority. And at the same time, he charges these rulers with unfaithfulness to God and with the plot to murder the very Son of God. But Jesus does it in such a way that they're unable to arrest him, attack him, or even accuse him of being at fault. After all, he just tells them this little story. But it's a powerful story, and its message is thinly veiled, and these enemies are quick to see the meaning of it. He speaks of a man who builds this vineyard and rented it out to some vine growers. These vine growers, instead of giving the owner his due, when he sent his servants, they beat them and abused them and killed them, and finally they murder his son. And the owner returns to destroy the vine growers and give it to others. As I said, these men quickly realize who Jesus is talking about and that he's talking about them. The vineyard, of course, is an Old Testament symbol of Israel. And the vine growers here are represented in the rulers who God had entrusted the spiritual care of his people. The messengers who he sent to them were the prophets, which included John the Baptist. And Jesus had just mentioned him in his question to them about what authority was John's teaching. Was it from heaven and from men? And they were not unwilling, or they were unwilling to answer him. And they had rejected John. That's one of the reasons they wouldn't answer. They wouldn't say it was from heaven, because they didn't obey when he called for them to repent, for the kingdom of heaven was at hand. In fact, all of the prophets, all the way down to John, these rulers had rejected, wounded, and killed. And now the Son had come, which is Jesus Christ. And he was God's only Son, whom the chief priests and the elders were attacking, and they, because of their hate and because of their envy, they were conspiring to kill him. But the judgment was sure to come to these faithless keepers of the vineyard. And they and their nation were going to be destroyed, and God would turn his blessings to the Gentiles. So here Jesus not only predicts his death, he does so saying it's going to be at the hands of these people whom he's talking to. And he closes it with a prophecy to show his certain victory and triumph. Death was not going to be a defeat for Jesus. He will be victor. He will be king. And just as the Old Testament declared, he will be like the stone which the builders rejected, but became a chief cornerstone. It would hold the place of chief dignity and power and authority. They want to know by what authority he did these things. This was it. He is the Christ. He is the Son of God. So in this, Jesus shows his divine foreknowledge by placing him as superior to the prophets as the very Son of God, and at the same time giving a warning about not receiving him and the consequences that are going to come because they reject him. And as I said, they realized this, and they would have killed him right then if they didn't fear the people. They want to kill him so bad, but they can't, not at this point. We pick back up in Mark chapter 12 and verse 13. It says, "And they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to him in order to trap him in a statement. And they said to him, 'Teacher, we know that you're truthful and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to pay a poll tax to Caesar or not? Shall we pay or shall we not pay?' But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, 'Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius and to look at.' And they brought one. And he said to them, 'Whose likeness and inscription is this?' And they said to him, 'Caesar's.' And Jesus said to them, 'Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.' And they were amazed." Jesus has just been attacked again by these rulers, asking him by what authority he'd done. He silenced them by his counter question about John and his teaching being from heaven or from men. Like I said, they would have killed him right there if they'd had the opportunity, but they feared the multitudes because Jesus is so popular. He has just told this parable, which points them out as the ones who are not doing the will of God and acting treacherously toward those whom had been sent to them and now are plotting to kill God's Son. Before they can kill him, they want to try to first discredit him before the people. They want to try to entangle him in his teaching. So to do so, they send some others. They've not done so well, so they send some others with a series really of 3 questions, and they're very craftily put together questions. And Jesus evades each one of them. He answers each one fairly. He does answer them completely, but then by his questions, he silences his enemies again. Now this first question here that we've just read has to do with the payment of tribute, the poll tax to the Roman government. Now there was 2 groups of the Jews. They thought different ways about this. Most of the people, conservative-minded Jews, would hold that God was the ruler of Israel and that it was possibly even wrong to pay taxes to support such a heathen government. At least they didn't want to, and that would have been the popular idea among the people. The more liberal party sided with the Herods. They owed their power to Rome, and of course they would have been for paying the tax. So again, the enemies, they send men, and they send them from both parties. The Pharisees, who'd been more conservative in their thinking, and the Herodians, who had been more liberal. One would have said they ought not pay the tax, one said they should pay the tax. So his answer, they think, is sure to offend one of the 2 parties, and therefore they're going to use that to stir up the people against him. So they approached Jesus, first of all, with this flattery, assuring him that they know that he'll be truthful and courageous and not be partial, but give them his true thoughts about this. And so they posed their carefully crafted question about the poll tax. Now, if Jesus answers yes, then he's going to cease to be popular with the people. They're going to stir up the people. He's saying, well, he says that we ought to pay taxes to Rome, and the people loathed and hated the oppression of Rome. But if he says no, then they're the Herodians, and they're ready to take him away as a traitor and as a rebel against the government. To them, their scheme, they think they've got this sewed up. They think there's no way out for Jesus. They think they have him one way or another, no matter how he answers, and they're just ready to take him off. Yet Jesus escapes the snare, and he does by this reply, asking for a coin. And in doing so, he sets forth a law for all time. It says, knowing their hypocrisy, he said, why are you testing me? Bring a denarius to him. This is what was used to pay the tax. And they brought one to him, and he says, whose likeness is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. Caesar's picture is on the coin. And Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God's the things that are God's. You know, the use of this coin in his answer made the message plain. If they accept coins from Caesar, then they need to pay taxes to Caesar. If one accepts protection and privileges, things that are provided by a government, then their obligation to support that government. And the responsibility to civil government, however, is not the whole of life. And we have a responsibility to our government as citizens, but we have a responsibility first and foremost to God. And this is a higher allegiance. So he says, render to God the things that are God's. The enemy suggested that there was a conflict between those two things, rendering unto the government, rendering unto God. But Jesus shows that there's a responsibility to both, and that they're not in conflict, but in harmony with one another. And it's that way today. We have citizenship under the government in which we live, and as far as those laws do not go against God's laws, we're to obey the laws and be loyal to our country and stand for law and order and pay our taxes for the services that we render from the government. And at the same time, we have a greater responsibility to fulfill our duties to God through our love and our service and our devotion in our daily lives. Now, when Jesus says this, they thought they had him, that he couldn't answer one way or another, that he wasn't going to be caught. But he silences his enemies again, showing the responsibility to both. And those who had come, who thought they had him in an inescapable dilemma, leave silence, it says, and they were amazed. And Jesus' teaching today still is amazing, especially as we look at it and apply it to our daily lives. A lot of things to think about. We'll stop there for today. Hope that you'll be back with us as we continue our study. Until then, I hope you have a good day.